Assalamu alaikum students, I hope you all are well, safe and healthy at home. I'm your course instructor Farzana Khan and welcome to all of you in this class of English language teaching. So previously you were taught about audiolingual method of teaching, and in today's class we are going to talk about teaching oral communication skills. Well, by the end of today's class, you will be able to understand the importance of oral communication skills. You will be able to understand the theory and techniques of teaching oral communication skills. And finally, you will be able to apply the techniques of teaching oral communication skills in your class while teaching communication skills. So pay close attention to the lecture to understand the theory and the techniques which you can apply while teaching English language skills to your students. So when we talk about teaching oral communication skills, it means the basic focus should be given on improving the speaking skill of the students. So basically, when we talk about the language and specifically the English language, it is basically a language. So for developing the language skill of any student, it's very important. A teacher should try to improve the four skills of the students: reading, writing, speaking, and listening. So from the initial stages, reading and writing are important. At the same time, speaking and listening skills are also very important. So speaking in a second or foreign language has often been viewed as the most demanding of the four skills, because the person who can speak well, who can speak confidently, can be considered good at speaking any language. If you are good at writing but you cannot speak well, you cannot express your ideas while speaking, then we cannot say that you are good at speaking. That's why the speaking in the second language is basically considered the most important skill. And this is the skill which tells other person that how much competent you are at particular language. If you're not fluent, if you cannot speak well, then it means you're not good at language. So the question arises, what specifically makes speaking in a second or foreign language difficult? Because it's from the very start, the efforts are going on. There are a lot of research in developing the second language acquisition and in improving the second language of the students. So what are the difficulties due to which basically the students are still unable to speak well? They are unable to communicate in the target language confidently. So the first point is that we had not been prepared for spontaneous communication and could not cope with all of its simultaneous demands. Basically, when we talk about the communication, it's basically a two-way process. At the same time, it is basically a simultaneous process. You don't have ample time to think, then to make a structure of the sentence, and then to translate into the target language, and then to speak. You need to respond simultaneously when you are talking to other person. So basically, for this spontaneous process, you are not well prepared. So when you are going to teach your students, it's very important. You need to teach your students to cope with the spontaneous response. The student must be able to respond in the target language spontaneously. So this is the major reason that the students are taught specifically into the controlled environment, and for control and content, proper structure which is basically provided to the student to talk in the particular context, and they do prepare and they present, but that is not the natural way of speaking. So in the silent way, this is basically a method of developing and teaching English language to the students. So in this method, students' speech is carefully controlled. They are given chunks of written pieces, they are given a particular topic, they do prepare and then they present. So we can say that this type of speech is basically controlled for structure and for content. Well, we also have discussed about the audiolingual method of teaching in the previous class, and focus even in the audiolingual method is also given on improving the oral skills of the students. But in this method, again, the focus is given on repetition, in which the teacher provides certain type of dialogues to the students. They do prepare, they do talk to the teacher, keeping in mind that context and that particular dialogue. And with the repetition, they do improve. Again, we can say that this is a controlled type of development of speaking skill. So in audiolingualism, stressed oral skills, speech production was tightly controlled in order to reinforce correct habit formation of linguistic rules. So this is also a controlled environment. Students are not developing the spontaneous way of responding to the other person. So when we talk about the theory of communicative competence, which is given by Himes in 1972, so this theory is basically focuses on developing the communication competence of the students from all aspects. And it basically includes the practice of communicative language teaching, the teaching of oral communication skills as contextualized. Socioculture activity has become the focal point. So according to this basically point of view, the competence of communication needs to improve. So the Himes concept of communicative competence, at the same time the teaching of oral communication skills as a contextualized and socio-cultural activity, basically in today's world has become a focal point in many English as a second language classrooms. So it has become very important in today's world that focus should be given on developing the spoken and oral communication skills of the learners. So Canale and Swan's adaptation of Himes' theory of communicative competence proposes that the ability to communicate in a language comprises four dimensions. So what are those four dimensions? Basically, they have stated that the first dimension is basically the grammatical competence. It means one must gain competency on grammatical rules. It basically includes the rule of phonology, means the sound pattern. One must be familiar and must be competent at the sound level. At the same time, orthography also plays very important role. So in grammatical competence, they states that orthography is also very important. It basically means the rules of arrangement of spelling of particular words, along with this vocabulary and word formation. So according to Canale and Swans, the first dimension for communicative competence is grammatical competence, which includes the rule of phonology, orthography, vocabulary, and word formation. And the second dimension is basically socio-linguistic competence. As the name indicates, means the language competencies keeping in mind the social context. It includes rules for the expression and understanding of appropriate social meaning and grammatical forms in different contexts. It means one must has the competency that what to speak at what place, means you need to speak keeping in mind the social context, because in every social context the person needs to communicate keeping in mind the people, the social culture, and the social setting. So this is also called socio-linguistic competence. And the second dimension is discourse competence. It means along with the grammatical competence, socio-linguistic competence, discourse competence is very important for developing communicative competence. So discourse competence basically includes the rule of both cohesion. It means how sentence elements are tied together via references, repetition, and synonym. And coherence, which basically means how texts are constructed. And discourse competence basically means the rules of cohesion and coherence. So for gaining competency on communication, one must has discourse competency. Along with this, strategic competence is also very important. This is the fourth and the last dimension of communicative competence. It basically means It means a repertoire of compensatory strategies that help with a variety of communication difficulties. The person must has the ability to overcome in different contexts, the situations, the barriers and the hurdles which are arising during the communication. So the question arises, what features of this theoretical approach are relevant to teaching oral skills? Let's talk about the features of this approach which are basically relevant to teaching oral skills. So the first point is that it is no longer acceptable to focus only on developing the grammatical competence of students with a number of language teaching methodologies which were popular in the past. Basically, as there are four dimensions of communicative competence, grammatical competence, sociolinguistic competence, because communication and specifically the oral communication is not only the grammatical competence and the competence of utterance, but how to speak, what to speak, when and where to speak, it is very important. And for this purpose, in teaching oral skills, it is also very important that focus should not be given only on developing the grammatical competence of the students. Here, focus should also be given on developing the oral skills and how to speak very well in the different socio-linguistic contexts. So, in today's world, the teachers are expected to balance a focus on accuracy with a focus on fluency as well. If your task is to develop the communication skill, so it's not specifically developing the grammatical rules and the spoken style. Here the focus should also be given on accuracy as well as fluency of the students. When we talk about the fluency, basically according to Hodge, the term fluency has two meanings. First is that the ability to link units of speech together with facility and without strain or inappropriate slowness or undue hesitation. Mean there should not be too much hesitation, there should not be too much slowness, which is inappropriate. Proper slowness can be acceptable because pauses are acceptable, but when you are giving too much pauses, it basically reveals that you don't have vocabulary and it basically affects your fluency of speaking. So natural language use, according to Hatch, the fluency has two meanings: the ability to link units of speech and the natural language use. The way you talk, the way you speak, it should be the natural way. So which is likely to take place when speaking activities focus on meaning and its negotiation. When speaking strategies are used and overcorrection is minimized. When you are uttering what is occurring in your mind rather than uttering the cramming material and the cramming content. So the second feature of this communicative competence approach, also relevant to the oral teaching, oral communication skills. The second point is that the multiple skills should be taught whenever possible. This is also the point in oral communication skills, that the multiple tasks should be taught whenever possible, because according to Murphy basically believes that oral skills teachers should always connect speaking, listening, and pronunciation. Teaching, although the focus in any one class or activity may highlight one or another. Basically, oral skill classes may use reading and writing activities as the basis or follow up for speaking activities. It basically means when you are teaching to your students the oral communication skills, it doesn't mean the focus should only given to oral skills. Here the fluency and pronunciations is very important, but along with this, the other skills are also very important because the purpose is to develop the language competency in the target language. So along with the oral skills, it is also very important to focus on listening, reading and writing, because when we talk about the reading and writing, these can be considered the basis for learning any language. So focus should also be given in developing the reading and writing skills along with the oral skills of the students. So keeping in mind the theory of Himes, which is basically the communicative competence, we can also relate it with the oral teaching skills. because the communication strategies, the concept given by Dornier, he also stated, Zoltan Dornier in 1995 also stated that language learners must become competent at using strategies which are circumlocution, hesitation devices, appeal for help. So you must be thinking that what are these strategies? So, circumlocution basically means the use of many words where fewer words could be used, especially in a deliberate attempt to make the statement vague and ambiguous. Because this is also a device which the speaker sometimes uses when he has no proper answer to give to the listener. So, the other device is hesitation device. So, hesitation devices are the devices when you are talking and you are not sure exactly what to say, and at that time you use interjections as your hesitation devices such as mm. So such type of devices are basically used just to give long pause and just to tell other speaker to speak. It basically tells the other speaker that you are hesitating to tell certain points. And the third strategy is basically appeal for help. These are basically the gestures in which you show other person as giving the puzzle expressions or giving eye contact to other person in a way it is considered indirect way of requesting other person to talk and to start communication in the form of the appeal aid to your communication. So these, along with grammatical competence, these you can say these are also socio-linguistic competency along with this strategic competency. So these three devices will come under the category of strategic competence. So oral communication development or communicative competence, not specifically developing the oral skill in which the person is able to speak and talk well. It basically enables the person to cope up with the different type of situations. So oral skills teachers should at least advocate and model their use. When the teacher will become model in front of the students, when the teacher will use certain devices and there will be no issues, then definitely the students will also understand all these points. And the third point is that students are encouraged to take responsibility for their own learning because motivation is very important. It is the motivation which forces the students to learn more, and it also increases the morale of the students for developing more and more communication skills. So the encouragement of the students is also the responsibility of the teacher. In the oral skills classroom, students should be allowed and encouraged. They should be encouraged to initiate communication when possible, to determine the content of their responses or contributions, and to evaluate their own production and learning progress. Because when they will evaluate their own learning process, then they will learn a lot. They will be able to understand their mistakes, and then they will be able to overcome their mistakes. So this is basically the actual way of developing the oral communication skills of the student. So when you are teaching in the oral classes, at that time being the teacher, you need to ask certain questions from yourself. Who are the students? Why are they there? What do they expect to learn? And what am I expected to teach them? So let's answer these questions one by one. So the first question which you need to ask, who are the students? It means understanding the level of the students because it's very important, and it is one of the rule of the communication that when you are talking to other person, there must be clarity in your voice. You need to talk keeping in mind the level of the listener. So when it comes to teaching, then definitely you need to understand the level of the students and their perceived needs. For this purpose, you can test administration by that institution or by a diagnostic test given by the teacher. You can give any type of task, any type of test to the student just to evaluate their level. And after that, you will be able to understand that from which level you need to start teaching to your learners, to your students for developing their communication skills. And the second question is, why are they there? It basically related to the information on learner needs, and it can be obtained by means of a student information sheet on which they report the amount of time they spend speaking English, their future goals, their goals for the course, and their assessment of their overall speaking ability, their confidence in speaking English, and their pronunciation, their social conversation and listening ability. These are very important. That why are they there? Definitely they want to improve further. So at which level they are right now, and what is your goal to improve them? And the next question arises, why do they expect to learn, and what do they expect to learn? Oral skills for non-academic adults focus on survival English and basic communication functions, which based on a strong structural component. But when it comes to the academic students for this purpose, at that time you need to keep it in your mind that here the expectations of the learners from you is basically that you must enable your students that they must be able to read, write and speak all type of academic activities properly. So the last question arises, what am I expected to teach? Basically, academic learners will need practice with different sorts of activities. When we talk about practice, it is basically the practice which makes the man perfect, whether it's the teaching, whether it's reading, writing, speaking, and listening. So, according to Fries and Tag, in general, what academic ESL students need most is extensive, authentic practice in the class participation. The more you will give them opportunities to improve, the more the practice opportunities and activities you are giving to your students, it means you are providing them the more exposure. And in this way, you are basically polishing, improving, and developing their skills. So, taking part in the discussion, interaction with the students, interaction with the peers, professors, teachers, and asking questions and requesting them to reply every time to the teacher are type of activities through which you can engage the students in the activities, and you can develop and improve their reading, writing, speaking, and listening skills. So when specifically it comes to the in developing oral communication skills of the students, then definitely it's your responsibility to provide them natural setting, natural environment in which they must be able to interact with others per people, and they must be able to talk in the natural setting. So it's very important to provide them proper opportunities by assigning and by designing different type of activities in the classroom. So it's all about today's lecture, that what are the techniques and what are the strategies of oral communication skills. So in the next class, we will focus specifically on the techniques and strategies which you can apply in the classroom for developing the oral communication skills of your student. So in this class, you learned about the theoretical approach of basically oral communication skills, the point of view of Zoltan, the Himes, the point of view of Canale and Swan. So it's all about today's class. I hope the points are clear in your minds, and in case of any confusion, you can contact me. We can discuss in the WhatsApp group, and we can also discuss in the classroom. So till the next class, take care. Allah Hafiz.